Hi there, and welcome back to Out There, an Unexplained podcast. I'm your host, Josh. On the last day of each month, Trevor comes out with a new episode focused on an unexplained event or phenomena that he finds weird. Make sure you follow the podcast on Instagram at Out There Unexplained and check out the posts he makes for each episode and maybe send some suggestions you'd like to hear. Happy Halloween! It's our favorite day of the year, and I cannot wait to finish off strong with our witch-themed month. Because this episode is on such a special day, this episode is going to be a little different. There aren't going to be any scary stories interwoven like usual, because this is one long, scary story. Trevor is working hard behind the scenes, so I came here today to tell you all one of my favorite unexplained events that has gained such fame. A story that may be a ghost story, maybe a witch's tale, or maybe just an unexplained event. So sit back with some candy in a candlelit room as we discuss the Bell Witch. Let's dive in. Some hauntings come and go. Some linger in our nightmares but fade as years pass. And then there's the Bell Witch. A story so deeply ingrained in American folklore that it has survived for more than 200 years. It's a tale of eerie apparitions, unexplained noises, violent attacks, and even murder. The events that plagued the Bell family in the early 1800s in Adams, Tennessee, have terrorized those who have heard and read of the tale for centuries. Events that still haunt the land and leave many asking, did it ever really end? In 1817, Adams, Tennessee, it was a small rural farming community where life was simple but tough. Most families like the Bells lived in a log cabin, farming crops like corn, wheat, and tobacco, and raising livestock to survive. There were no modern conveniences, no electricity, no plumbing, or running water. So daily chores involved a lot of manual labor just to keep things running smoothly. Religion was a huge part of life, with church gatherings acting as both a place of worship and a social hub. Communities were close-knit, and people leaned on each other to get through the challenges of frontier life. But life was fairly peaceful, all things considered. That is, until one autumn evening. John Bell came across something strange, a creature with the body of a dog but the head of a rabbit. Spooked by the sight, John shot at the creature, but it disappeared into thin air. Not long after, strange sightings started to multiply. One day, Drew Bell, John's son, saw what looked like an enormous bird sitting on a fence. When he tried to get closer, the bird flew away, revealing its extraordinary size. As if this wasn't unsettling enough, young Betsy Bell soon claimed she had seen a little girl in a green dress swinging from the branches of an oak tree. And then there was Dean, one of the Bell's enslaved workers, who swore he was followed by a large black dog whenever he visited his wife at night. These encounters were strange, sure, but they were just the beginning. Soon after these sightings, the family started experiencing strange noises around the house. They would hear knocking on the walls and doors, but no one was ever there. Then it sounded as if invisible dogs were fighting inside the house, and they would hear chains being dragged across the floor late at night. The Bell family even began to hear faint whispers that sounded like an old woman softly singing hymns. But before long, the activity turned violent. The children's sheets were pulled off in the dead of night while they slept, straight off the end of their beds with great force. This disturbance intensified, especially for their youngest daughter, Betsy, who faced horrifying attacks from the invisible force. She would have her hair pulled and was frequently slapped, leaving welts and marks on her body. Concerned about these escalating incidents, John Bell confided in his closest friend, James Johnston, about their family troubles. Initially skeptical, Johnston and his wife stayed overnight at the Bells' home. Things seemed calm at first, but after they went to bed, they experienced the same terrifying occurrences the Bells had reported. After being jolted awake when the bed covers were ripped off and James was slapped, he shouted, "In the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want?" The entity remained silent, and the rest of the night was uneventful. The next morning, Johnston suggested that the source of this disturbance was likely an evil spirit, like those mentioned in the Bible. News of the strange happening spread beyond their settlement, as curious neighbors and travelers started visiting the Bell's farm. The haunting grew even more bizarre and intelligent. The spirit, now fully audible, began to speak in a voice that everyone could hear. When asked, "Who are you and what do you want?" the voice replied in a feeble tone, "I'm a spirit. I was once very happy, but I have been disturbed." But when pressed further about its origins, the spirit gave multiple conflicting answers. At times, it claimed to be connected to a disturbed Native American burial mound on the Bell property. Other times, it hinted that buried treasure was hidden somewhere on the farm. Drew Bell and a friend named Bennett Porter even searched for the treasure, but they found nothing. One of the most famous visitors of the house was Andrew Jackson, who would later become the 7th President of the United States. John Bell and his brothers, Drury and Jesse Bell, had fought under General Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans. When Jackson heard about these strange happenings, he decided to visit the Bell farm with several of his men. As they approached the property, their wagon wheels suddenly locked in place, refusing to budge. Jackson exclaimed, "By the eternal, boys, that must be the Bell Witch." And at that moment, they all heard a female voice respond, allowing them to proceed and promising that she would be visiting again later that night. Then the wheels were able to move. Jackson and his men made their way across the Bell property and reached the Bell home, setting up camp in the yard. That evening, Jackson shared old war stories with the group, and one man with them claimed to be a witch tamer. He pulled out a shiny pistol with a silver bullet and declared that no spirit would dare approach him, since the bullet could kill any evil entity. The man insisted that nothing had happened so far because the witch was afraid of him. But he spoke too soon. The self-proclaimed witch tamer screamed in agony, thrashing wildly, as if invisible hands were stabbing him with pins and beating him. Suddenly, the man was launched out of the house by an unseen force, receiving a sharp kick in his rear end on the way out. The entity then announced that there was another fraud among Jackson's group, and promised to reveal him the next evening. This was too much for Jackson and his men, who were now begging to leave. Jackson, however, was determined to stay and uncover the other imposter. His men reluctantly retreated to their tents for the night, though they kept pleading with Jackson to abandon the farm. What exactly happened after is still unknown, but what is known is the next morning, Jackson and his entourage were seen in the nearby town of Springfield, making their way back to Nashville. According to some accounts, Jackson later remarked, "I would rather fight the British at New Orleans than take on the Bell Witch." The spirit grew bolder over time. It began mimicking conversations that took place in neighboring households, sometimes repeating entire sermons, word for word, that were preached miles away. At other times, the spirit would vanish briefly and return with gossip from neighboring farms, as if it had been eavesdropping. The spirit was also deeply familiar with biblical scripture and religious teachings. It seemed to take pleasure in engaging in religious arguments, often twisting verses and mocking those who tried to challenge it. The Bell Witch didn't just stick to pranks and harassment. It became dangerously focused on John Bell Sr., calling him Old Jack. The entity repeatedly declared its intent to kill him. For nearly a year, Bell had been dealing with episodes of facial twitching and increasingly trouble swallowing, and his conditions steadily worsened over time. In the fall of 1820, Bell's deteriorating health left him confined to the house. The spirit loved this and tormented him relentlessly. Whenever he tried to walk, it would yank his shoes off, and during brief moments of recovery from his frequent seizures, it would slap him across the face. Her voice echoed throughout the farm with insults. But then, the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed. He had fallen into a coma the day before, so the family was somewhat prepared. But what they weren't prepared for was near his bedside, the family discovered a small vial of black liquid. The family believed this to be poison, and they knew who was responsible for this. When they questioned the spirit about it, the entity gleefully admitted, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that poison." They threw the bottle into the fireplace, and the fire turned blue and went straight up and out of the chimney. John Bell's funeral was one of the most attended funerals in Robertson County, Tennessee. People came from far and wide to pay their respects, but the witch refused to let the family mourn in peace. As the mourners gathered to say their goodbyes, the witch's voice broke out into a series of drinking songs, and her cackling lasted until the last family member left the cemetery. But with the entity's target gone, it just went away. Just as fast as it came, it went. But that isn't the end of our story. Betsy Bell grew up and grew fond of a young man from the area named Joshua Gardner. The two were in love, and with the permission from both of their families, decided to get engaged, bringing joy to everyone and them. Well, almost everyone. The malicious entity was anything but pleased. It grew increasingly hostile, demanding that Betsy call off the engagement and warning her not to marry Joshua. Sadly, they couldn't escape the entity's torment no matter where they went. Whether they visited the river, explored the fields, or played in the nearby cave, the spirit was always there, harassing them relentlessly. The constant pressure and harassment became too overwhelming for Betsy to bear. On Easter Monday of 1821, she met Joshua by the river, and with a heavy heart, ended their engagement. The spirit was very happy. Again, she won. And after this victory, the spirit told John Bell's widow, Lucy Bell, that it would leave the family, but promised to return in 7 years. And sure enough, in 1828, the witch returned to visit Lucy Bell and her sons. This time, much of the interactions focused on John Bell Jr., engaging him in deep conversations about topics like the origin of life, the development of civilization, Christianity, and the need for a spiritual awakening. The spirit also made several predictions about major events, including the Civil War, though not all of its forecasts proved accurate. After 3 weeks, the entity bid farewell, but not before promising to return again in 107 years. That placed the next visit in 1935. In 1934, Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, the great-grandson of John Bell, published a book on the Bell Witch, likely aiming to draw attention to the spirit's promised return the following year. The book provided the first recorded account of the 1828 discussions between the entity and John Bell Jr. According to the book, Dr. Bell's father, Dr. Joel Thomas Bell, had taken notes during these encounters, and upon his death, those notes were passed down to Charles. However, Dr. Bell never followed up with any additional writings or updates about the spirit's return. He passed away in 1945 and was laid to rest in Bellwood Cemetery, located in Adams, Tennessee. As for whether the Bell Witch actually reappeared in 1935, opinions vary. Some believe she never showed up, while others suggest that if she did return, no one noticed. But many locals maintain that the Bell Witch never truly left the area to begin with. To this day, the Bell Witch legend remains one of the most famous unexplained events in American history. Was it a demonic entity, a vengeful spirit, a real witch, or a fragment of the imagination? The Bell Witch haunting has sparked many theories over the years. Some believe the family and community may have suffered from mass hysteria, leading them to imagine or exaggerate the events. Others suggest that the Bell Witch may have been the result of family drama, possibly orchestrated by Betsy Bell to avoid her engagement. There was even a theory about Betsy and Joshua's former schoolteacher, Professor Richard Powell. He had shown a noticeable interest in Betsy for some time, even expressing a desire to marry her when she was older. Though Powell was perceived as a charming bachelor, he was secretly married to a woman in Nashville and was said to be skilled in the occult, ventriloquism, mathematics, horticulture, and geology. Some believe that he orchestrated the entire thing, but true believers argue that the events cannot be explained by rational means, pointing to the detailed witness accounts and John Bell's death as evidence of a genuine haunting. The story has inspired books, films, and countless paranormal investigations, and while the original Bell home is no longer standing, visitors can explore the Bell Witch Cave, located near the site of the old Bell Farm, which will have to be its own episode someday. Many believe that the spirit still lingers in the area, and some visitors to the cave have reported unexplained noises and eerie sensations. The Bell Witch haunting continues to captivate audiences, not only because of its eerie events, but because it touches on themes of family, faith, and the unknown. Whether it was a genuine haunting, or a case of mass hysteria, or something else entirely, the story of the Bell family reminds us that sometimes the line between fact and folklore is very, very thin. So, what do you think? Could the Bell Witch still be out there? We are on Instagram, @OutThereUnexplained, so make sure to follow us and tell us all of your thoughts on the cases we cover and what you'd like to hear next. Also, while you are there, check out the link tree in our bio to check out all the other forms of social media we have, such as the new Discord server and any other things we have going on there. Make sure to rate us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. It's a great way for others to find the podcast and enjoy, just like you. On the 30th of the next month, Trevor will be covering the unsettling feeling that reality has momentarily unraveled, where something ordinary behaves in an impossible way, leaving you to question if the world around you is as real as it seems. We will be talking about Glitch in the Matrix stories. See you next time. This episode was written and hosted by me, Josh, with logo designed by Jason Sykes and theme music from Pearl.